and sensitivity and understanding, it's also a form of ignorance. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. And because of this, it leaves out things that are terribly important. It leaves out things that would, if we did know them, allay our anxieties and fears and horrors. And if we could extend our awareness, you see, to include those things that we leave out, we would have a deep interior peace. Because we would all know the one thing that you mustn't know. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more, you know, according to the rules of our particular social game. The one thing you mustn't know, that's really not allowed, that is the lowdown on life. And then the lowdown, on the one hand, means the real dirt on things. But the lowdown is also what is profound, what is mysterious, what is in the depths. And there's something left out. And our everyday consciousness screens this out in the same way that when you say you have weaving, you have, say, on this rug here in front of us, when the black finishes here, the black threads will go underneath and then appear again over here, then they'll go underneath the white and then they'll appear again over here, you know? So that the back will be the obverse pattern of the front. Now, the world is like that. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. Our sense organs are selective. They pick out certain things. They're receptive. For example, we have a small band, what you might call a spectrum of light, of sound, of tactile sensation, and so on, to which the human organism is sensitive. But we know that outside that small band, there is a huge range of vibrations to which we have built instruments that are sensitive. Things like cosmic rays, ultraviolet rays, gamma rays, hard X-rays, and so on. They're all outside the band of our spectrum. And obviously, there are things that are outside the range of our instruments. We may build new instruments someday which will evoke, bring into our consciousness other orders of vibration altogether, but yet, as yet, we don't know about. So you could imagine, you see, the universe is a vast system of vibrations and has infinite possibilities. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday vibrations, you know, are like the strings on a harp. And the harps that the angels are supposed to play in heaven are really this huge possibility. See, when you play the harp, you select strings. You don't play all the strings. It's stupid to just run your finger along the whole edge of the harp, back and forth, and go. What you do is you pick out with your fingers, select, just like on the piano, you don't go. You pick out certain notes, and these make the patterns. But at the same time as you pick out, you reject what you don't pick out. But it's all there, constituting a fundamental continuity, the kind of continuity of the thread as they go to the back of the woven material and make up the obverse of the pattern that's on the front. Now, the question that is absolutely basic for all human beings is, what have you left out? What have you left out? What have you left out? Really? You are focused on certain things that constitute what you call everyday reality. Look, you single out people and you see them sitting all around. Sitting all around. And you know there are things that are really there. And then behind the people are the houses or whatever we live in, the earth, and behind all that, the sky, and so on. But we see the world as a collection of rather disjointed events and things. And I might say to you as you came in here today, now, my goodness, you all forgot something. What did you forget? You think, my goodness, did I put my pants on? Did I wear a sweater? Did I put my glasses and my hair on, or my wig or whatever? No, it's none of that. Or something you forgot. See, everybody's forgotten something. You left it out. Just missed it. See? And so I can bring this out, what you've forgotten, if I ask you, who are you? Well, you say, I'm Paul Jones, or whatever your name happens to be. I say, oh, no, don't give me that stuff. Who are you, really? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you, really? And you think, whoa, of course, I'm just me. No, don't give me that. I don't want to hear all that nonsense. You're playing a trick on me. Really, deep down, who are you? I don't know. Well, that's the thing to find out. That's the thing that's been forgotten. See, that's the underside of the tapestry, the thing that's been left out. Because what we are carefully taught to ignore is that every one of us, fundamentally, deep inside, is an act of, a function of, a performance of, a manifestation of the works. The whole blinking cosmos, with all its galaxies, and forever and ever and ever, whatever it is beyond that, what you might call God in the Western tradition, or Brahman in Hindu philosophy, or Tao in Chinese. Every one of us is really that, but we are pretending we aren't. And we are pretending with tremendous skill and deception. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you really? Now, what I would call a really swinging human being is a person who lives on two levels at once. He's able to live on the level of being his ordinary ego, his everyday personality, and play his role in life and observe all the rules and so on that go with that. But if he's only on that level, if he's only playing that kind of thing and thinks that's all there is, it becomes a drag. And he starts being the kind of person who feels that he's just got to go on surviving. It's terribly important to go on surviving. Live. He works at that. And his children learn the same attitude from him. He says, well, I've got to survive because I've got all these children I've got to support, and so on and so forth. And then they take the same attitude. And they breed up children, and they feel compulsive about supporting them. They've got to go on. And so nobody really has any fun. It's just we got to make this thing, see? And you don't have to. See, whenever I get somebody who comes to me and says, I really can't go on and I have to commit suicide, I say, well, that's entirely, you're right. There's really no reason why you should go on, and if you want to commit suicide, do it. You can check out. Of course, this reduces anxiety when they feel free to commit suicide. They don't really have to commit suicide so much. You can commit partial suicide.
Akira. He's got clout.
The sense that you just have to go on living. That life is a must. When you say to anything spontaneous, see, life is spontaneous. It happens, in the words of the Taoists, Ziran, which means of itself so. That's their Chinese expression for nature. What happens by itself, what isn't pushed, but it just pops up, you see? You came into being, you know? It happens in a kind of a plop way like that, see? Now, you can't tell that process. You ought to happen. You must happen. Because that puts a bind on it. In the same way as when you have a child and all the relatives that come to a party on Thanksgiving, the child into the middle of all the relatives and say, now dear, play. Now dear, play, play. Now dear, play, play. Play on to my, on to play on to my, on to play on to my, on to play, play. Say now dear, play, play. Now dear, play, play. Play on to my, on to play on to my, on to play on to my, on to play. See, it absolutely bugs the child to do it like that. And so this is the problem for every artist. Because an artist is a man who makes his living by playing. Whether he's dancing, painting, or playing music, or whatever it is. And he has to overcome this problem. He has to know how to play in public at a given time on an appointment. See? Now that's not an easy thing to learn. But when you catch on to the trick of it, you can do it. To play on demand. That's the hardest lesson of life. To contrive what is called by my Japanese artist friend Saburo Hasegawa a controlled accident. Now dear, play, play. Now dear, play, play. Play on to my, on to play on to my, on to play on to my, on to play, play. Say now dear, play, play. Now dear, play, play. Play on to my, on to play on to my, on to play on to my, on to play, play. Now dear, play, play. Now dear, play, play. Play on to my, on to play on to my, on to play on to my, on to play, play. Say now dear, play, play. Now dear, play, play. Play on to my, on to play on to my, on to play on to my, on to play, play. The thing is that we have been educated to use our minds in a certain way, a way that ignores or screens out the fact that every one of us is an aperture through which the whole cosmos looks out. Every one of us is an aperture through which the whole cosmos looks out. You see, it's as if you had a light covered with a black ball, and in this ball were pinholes. And each pinhole is an aperture through which the light comes out. So in that way, every one of us is actually a pinhole through which the fundamental light, that is the existence itself, looks out. Only the game we're playing is not to know this. to be only that little hole, which we call me, my ego, my specific John Jones, or whatever. Every one of us is an aperture through which the whole cosmos looks out. Every one of us is an aperture through which the whole cosmos looks out. If we can maintain at the same time the sense of being this specific John Jones with his role in life, or whatever, and know also underneath this that we are the whole works, you get a very marvelous and agreeable arrangement. A most remarkable harmoniousness. I mean, it gives one's life a great sense of joy and exuberance if you can carry on these two things at once. If you, in other words, you know that all the serious predicaments of life are a game. Every one of us is an aperture through which the whole cosmos looks out. Every one of us is an aperture through which the whole cosmos looks out. Now, I want to put it two ways. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, something to be condemned, to take your own individual life seriously, in dead earnest, and to have all the problems that go with that. Do you understand that being that way, that being a real mixed up human being, is a manifestation of nature? That is something just like patterns on the waves out here. Patterns on the waves. Patterns on the waves. Patterns on the waves. Patterns on the waves. Or like a seashell. You know, we pick up shells. I always keep one around, as sort of an example. For many things. Say, my goodness, isn't that gorgeous? There's not an aesthetic fault in it anywhere. It's absolutely perfect. Now, I wonder if these fish look at each other's shells and say, don't you think she's kind of fat? Oh my, those markings aren't really very well spaced. Because that's what we do. Patterns on the waves. Patterns on the waves. That's what we do. Patterns on the wave. Patterns on the wave. That's what we do. See, we don't realize that all of us in our various goings-on and behavior and so on are just as much and more marvelous, much more complicated, much more interesting. All these gorgeous faces that I'm looking at, you know, every one of them, some are supposedly pretty, some are supposedly not so pretty, but they're all absolutely gorgeous. And everybody's eyes is a piece of jewelry beyond compare. Beautiful. 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 Patterns on the wave. Patterns on the wave. That's what we do. Patterns on the wave. Patterns on the wave. That's what we do. We have specialized in a certain kind of awareness that makes us neglectful. You see, we specialize in more or less briefly concentrated, pinpoint attention. We look at this and we look at that, and we select from all the things we might possibly be aware of, only certain things. And as a result of that, we leave out of our everyday consciousness one amazing beauty of experience that we never see at all. And on the other hand, the very deep thing, the sense of our basic identity, unity with, oneness with the total process of being. See, because we're staring, as it were, at certain features of the landscape, we don't see the background. And because we get fascinated with, you know, I could go into details of this shell, as I said, and put myself in the mind of a conch or whatever it is that lives in this thing, and to say, that's not so hot, that one. Like that, see? And so, I wouldn't see the whole thing. But when I look at it like this, when anybody looks at it like that, we say, oh my God, isn't that gorgeous? 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 Another way of talking about the web is that there are different levels of magnification. For example, supposing you take a piece of embroidery, and here it is, obviously in front of you, an ordered and beautiful object. Then you take out a microscope, and you look at the individual threads. At a certain point, as you turn up the microscope, you'll get a hopeless tangle. It doesn't make any sense at all. The wrapped fiber that constitutes the thread is a mess. It hasn't been organized, nobody did anything about it. But at the level of magnification at which you actually see it with the naked eye, it's all been organized. It's all been organized. It's all been organized. It's all been organized. All right, now keep turning up that microscope. Take one of those individual threads in the fiber that seems to be so chaotic and go into the constitution of that. And again, you will find fantastic order. You'll find the most gorgeous designs of molecules. Then to keep turning it up, and again at a certain level you'll find chaos again. All right, keep going. And at another level you'll find this marvelous order. Now you see, order and randomness constitute, in other words, the warp and the woof. Where everything is in order, everything's under control. In randomness, it's all been organized. It's a mess. 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 But we wouldn't know what order was unless we had messes. It's the contrast of order and messes that order itself depends upon. And so in exactly the same way, it is the contrast of on and off, there and not there. In other words, life and death, being and non-being, that constitutes existence. Only we pretend that the random side of things, the disorderly side of things, could possibly win in the game of competition, or I would rather call it collaboration between the two. When you lose sight of the fact that the order principle and the random principle go together, that's exactly the same predicament as losing sight of the fact that all individually delineated things and beings are connected underneath. You know, just like mountains stick out of the earth and there's the fundamental earth underneath them, so all of us as different things, we stick out of reality. And there's a continuity underneath, but you ignore that. See, that's the thing that's left out. It's all been organized. It's a mess. 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 See, I'm just giving you many examples of the same principle.
Akira. He's got clout.
Really, deep down, we are each one one of us, everything that there is. Doing it this way, and again that way, and again another way. Doing it this way, and again that way, and again another way. Really, deep down, we are, each one of us, everything that there is. Doing it this way, and again that way, and again another way. And that's what it keeps up doing forever and ever. Only, it has holidays, which are called deaths. You know, in the story of the creation of the world in the Bible, God works for 7 days and rests the seventh. It's necessary to have a holiday. Holidays, holy day. The point is that a holiday is pause between something going on, is of the essence of the idea of a web. A famous Irishman is supposed to have described a net as a lot of holes tied together with string. So the holes are very, very important. These are the holy days. You see the holes. This all goes together. Really, deep down, we are, each one of us, everything that there is. Doing it this way, and again that way, and again another way. Doing it this way, and again that way, and again another way. Really, deep down, we are, each one of us, everything that there is. Doing it this way, and again that way, and again another way. And that's what it keeps up doing forever and ever. So, there must be that interval. And it exists on all kinds of levels. It isn't simply that there is, for example, a sound that is sounded, is a vibration. And the sound goes on and off. Everything that we call sound is sound silence. There is no such thing as pure sound. You couldn't hear it. What you hear is that tap, 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 tap against the eardrum. But it happens very fast, so that you get more of an impression of sound than you do of silence. That between every little undulation of sound, there is also an interval. When you listen to music, you hear a melody. When you listen to music, you hear a melody. When you listen to music, you hear a melody. When you listen to music, you hear a melody. When you listen to music, you hear a melody. When you listen to music, you hear a melody. Really, deep down, we are, each one of us, everything that there is. Doing it this way, and again that way, and again another way. Doing it this way, and again that way, and again another way. Really, deep down, we are, each one of us, everything that there is. Doing it this way, and again that way, and again another way. And that's what it keeps up doing forever and ever.
Present events
when you listen
as
to
being
music,
caused
you hear a melody.
by past events.
When you listen to music,
And therefore, we tend to regard ourselves as the puppets of the past, as driven along by something that is always behind us. Now, to overcome this impression, it's very simple.
you begin again with an experiment. Approach the world through your ears. If you shut your eyes and make contact with reality purely with your ears, and you will realize that the sounds you are hearing are all coming out of silence.
You hear?
And it fades away. Fades, 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 and finally disappears. It's
It's a curious world, this, isn't it? Because you hear all the realities in it. The sounds, suddenly coming out of nothing. You don't see any reason for them to begin. They just appear, and then they echo away through the corridors of the mind, which we call memory. Now, if you open your eyes, it's a little harder to see this with your eyes because, unlike sounds, the eyes sound static. Or rather, they look static. Everything looks still to your eyes. But you must understand, the world you are looking at, say when you look at a light, that light is vibrating. All material things are vibrations, and they are vibrating at you now in the same way as the sound is vibrating on your ears. In other words, the present world that you see is a vibration coming just as the sound comes out of silence. The light is coming out of space. It's coming out of nothing straight at you now and echoing away into the past. So the course of time is really very much like the course of a ship in the ocean. Because here's the ship, you see, and it leaves behind it a wake. And the wake fades out, and that tells us where the ship has been, in just the same way as the past and our memory of the past tells us what we have done. But as we go back into the past, and we go back and back to prehistory, and we use all kinds of instruments and scientific methods for detecting what happened, we eventually reach a point where all record of the past fades away in just the same way as the wake of the ship. Now, the important thing to remember in this illustration is that the wake doesn't drive the ship any more than the tail wags the dog.
Yo, check it out, it's Raekwon the Chef, rocking with a Killer the Dawn, you heard? You know what it is, man.
What I'm saying is I think this. I'm trying to share with you a certain style of life and an attitude to life and an insight. I've taken you on one side and said,
Listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. There's a big deception going on, and you're involved in it, but I just thought you ought to know. I'm terribly puzzled about the way people go out of their way to disenjoy themselves. They take so much trouble about it. And all around, you have only to look, and you see this perfect passion for making the world look grisly. And it isn't only job builders and garage owners who do this kind of thing. It's also people who profess to be painters. They're actually using excrements for painting in Paris today, on the theory that the world is shot to pieces, that since the artist is a representative of his times, he ought to show the times as they really are.
as a social critic. So he makes the most weird. He paints Campbell's soup cans. And he makes music that shrieks and screams. He just goes out of his way to make it sound as ugly as he possibly can manage. And the ingenuity is about that is endless. Because that is the times. This is critical. You see?
Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. There's a big deception going on. And you're involved in it, but I just thought you ought to know it.
Let's take the character of the Pied Piper. The person who brings you an invitation to dance. I say then, you see, there is going to be a dance this evening, and I would like you all to come. That's the spirit in which I invite you to a seminar. I am not inviting you in the spirit of saying, no, we're going to have to discuss some very grave matters, and you ought to be awake to all these things and arouse your social conscience. When you get through with all that, then what? When you get through with all that, then what? When you get through with feeding the hungry and clothing the naked, and we are making great strides with automation and technology in abolishing poverty totally, then what are we going to do? Then what are we going to do? Well, you see, if you've got all these people clothed and fed and so on, then they say, well, now what next? If you've got a kind of Quakerish state of mind, you don't know what to do. Well, feed and clothe somebody else. Get busy. But then, where is that leading?
Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. There's a big deception going on. And you're involved in it, but I just thought you ought to know it. Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. There's a big deception going on. And you're involved in it, but I just thought you ought to know it.
Self has thus the capacity to abandon itself, to forget itself, to hide from itself, and thus to make the most completely convincing illusion. But in play. And so the activity, the creative activity of the Godhead in Hinduism is called Leela, which means play. Play. Our word lilt is related to it, I think. But so also in the book of Proverbs, you will find a discourse being given by the divine wisdom. The Lord possessed me in the beginning of his ways before his works of old. Its delight was to rejoice, the King James Bible says, in the presence of God and with the sons of men. But the Hebrew translated rejoice says play. 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 Rejoice is a sort of dignified Elizabethan, but it says play. And St. Thomas, aware of this, said that the divine wisdom was above all to be compared with games, because games are played for their own sake, not for any ulterior motive.
Meaning wave, because music is everything.
And so that is a nice little tangle. If I put this in the language of Oriental philosophy and religion, it would be something like this. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. One who abandons that desire attains nirvana, which is supreme peace, liberation. Nirvana means in Sanskrit, blow out. That is, exhale the breath. Exhale the breath. The opposite, desire, is to breathe in. Now, if you breathe in and hold it, you lose your breath. But if you breathe out, it comes back to you. It comes back to you. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. So the principle here is, if you want life, don't cling to it. Let go. Let go. But the problem is, if I desire not to desire, is that not already desire? How can I desire not to desire? How can I surrender myself when myself is precisely an urge to hold on, to cling to life, to continue to survive. To survive. To survive. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. I can see rationally that by clinging to myself I may strangle myself. I may be like a person who has a bad habit, as a result of which he is committing suicide. And he knows that, but can't give it up, because the means of death are so sweet.
Monks used to keep skulls on their desks. And people nowadays think that was very morbid. Everything's falling apart. So don't try and stop it. When you're falling off a precipice, it doesn't do you any good to hang on to a rock that's falling with you. See? But everything is doing that. And so again, this is another case of our completely wasting our energy in trying to prevent the world from falling apart.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
energy. With the free energy. With the free energy. Don't do it. When the Hindu says everything is unreal, the Westerner reacts and says, no, you can't treat life as a dream. It's serious, it's real, it's for real. And what do you mean by that? And what do you mean by that? Well, how real do you want it to be? This is, in other words, everything, insofar as it's falling apart, everything is changing, it is like smoke. And we all feel that smoke has a lesser degree of reality than wood. It's an image of the evanescent, of the ghostly. So there's this idea the whole world is this mirage. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's only bad if you cling to it. If you try to lean on it, changing. Maybe easier to think that way than in our environment. Although when you're out in California, the human landscape changes so fast that no town is the same for 2 years. Any mailing list that you have changes 1/3 addresses per annum. Nothing stays put. The hills are shadows and they flow from form to form and nothing stands.
It's a beautiful day to be alive here at the peak of recorded human civilization.
Akira.
He's got clout.
And what seems a good thing today turns out tomorrow to have been a disaster. What seemed in the moral and spiritual sphere too, like great virtues in times past, are easily seen today as hideous evil. Let's take, for example, the Inquisition. In its own day, among Catholics, the Holy Inquisition was regarded as we today regard the practice of psychiatry. You feel that in curing a person of cancer, almost anything is justified. The most complex operation, the most weird surgery. People suspended for days and days on end the end of tubes with X-ray penetration, burning. People undergoing shock treatment, people locked in the colorless, monotonous corridors of mental institutions. In all good faith, they knew that witchcraft and heresy were terrible things. Awful plagues, imperiling people's souls forever and ever. So any means were justified to cure people of heresy. We don't change. We don't change. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We don't change. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We can look back at those people and see how evil that was. But we can't see it in ourselves. So therefore, beware of virtue. We don't. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We don't. We're doing the same thing today, under different names. We don't. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We don't. We're doing the same thing today, under different names. So therefore, beware
virtues.
This is Source Wave Radio by Akira the Dawn. You are listening to Flash Vibes.
We white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, British, German, American, have been on a rampage for the past 100 or more years to improve the world. We have given the benefits of our culture, our religion, our technology to everybody, except perhaps the Australian Aborigines. And we have insisted that they receive the benefits of our culture, even our political styles, our democracy. You had better be democratic, or we'll shoot you.
And having conferred these blessings all over the place, we wonder why everybody hates us. See, because sometimes doing good to others, and even doing good to oneself, is amazingly destructive. Because it's full of conceit. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved. So we don't know. It's like the problem of geneticists, which they face today. I went to a meeting of geneticists not so long ago where they gathered in a group of philosophers and theologians and said, now look here, we need help. We now are on the verge of figuring out how to breed any kind of human character we would want to have. We can give you saints, philosophers, scientists, great politicians, anything you want. Just tell us. What kind of human beings want we to be? So, I said, how will those of us who are genetically unregenerate make up our minds what genetically generate people might be? Because I'm afraid very much that our selection of virtues may not work. It may be like, for example, this new kind of high-yield grain, which is becoming ecologically destructive. When we interfere with the processes of nature and breed efficient plants and efficient animals, there's always some way in which we have to pay for it. And I can well see that eugenically produced human beings might be dreadful. We could have a plague of virtuous people. You realize that? Do you realize that? Any animal considered in itself is virtuous, does its thing, but in crowds they're awful. Like a crowd of ants or locusts on the rampage. They're all perfectly good animals, but it's just too much. I could imagine a perfectly pestiferous mass of 1 million saints. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you.
But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved.
So I said to these people, look, there's the only thing you can do. Just be sure that a vast variety of human beings is maintained. Don't please breed us down to a few excellent types. Excellent for what? Excellent for what? We never know how circumstances are going to change and how our need for different kinds of people changes. We may need very individualistic and aggressive people. At another time, we may need very cooperative, team-working people. At another time, we may need people who are full of interest in dexterous manipulation of the external world. At another time, we may need people who explore into their own psychology and are introspective. There is no knowing. The more varieties and the more skills we have, obviously, the better. So you see, here again, the problem comes out in genetics. We do not really know how to interfere with the way the world is. Between the words we use, explicit and implicit. They're very valuable words. What is explicit? What's on the outside? Let's say how we come on publicly. Explicitly, we are thus and so. We have a fight. We're in competition, say, in business, explicitly. But implicitly, we've worked this out. We've agreed in a secret way that nobody knows about that this competition is extremely valuable to both of us. Take it politically, for example. Let's take the situation of Russia versus the United States. Explicitly, in public, this has to be a big fight. These two ways of life, these two ideologies are opposed. They say, no, we're... But behind the scenes, it's all been carefully worked out. You bet it has. That this opposition has to happen. Because our economy depends on it, and their economy depends on it. And everybody knows this, who's smart. But there are a lot of people who get taken in by the propaganda, and they should be taken in because that makes the thing work. It's crazy. But that's the way it goes. 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 And everything works this way. When swans start to mate, they're not sure what they're supposed to do. And they begin to fight. I had a long talk about this with C.G. Jung. He lived on the edge of Lake Zurich, and he had a little summer house right on the water's edge, and there were many swans there. And I was getting up at the end of a conversation with him, and we were beginning to walk back to the main house, and I said, "Isn't it true that swans are monogamous?" And he said, "Yes, they are." He said, "Do you know, I have had most interesting relationships between these swans and many of my female patients who thought they were homosexual." And Jung wasn't a sexual snob. I mean, he understood all the legitimacy of all kinds of sexual variation. But he said it has been a point of departure for our discussions. And he said it's a very funny thing that when they begin to mate, they start fighting. And they don't know what it's all about, and then suddenly the fight turns into lovemaking. So that's what I mean. Underneath opposition, there is love. Underneath duality, there's unity. The Tweedledum and Tweedledee agreed. That. It's crazy. But that's the way it goes. 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 See, here's that weaving principle. The things hold together by over, under, over, over, under, over, over, under. And that creates a stuff, it creates fabric, it creates clothing, it creates shelter, it creates what we call matter. Matter, mater, mother, and also the same word, maya, illusion. See, the world as a marvelous illusion. It's crazy, but that's the way it goes. 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 It's crazy. That's the way it goes. It's crazy. That's the way it goes. A marvelous illusion. A marvelous illusion. marvelous illusion.
But that's the way it goes. It's crazy. But that's the way it goes.
Marvelous illusion.
But that's the way it goes. It's crazy. That's the way it goes.
You're listening to Akira the Don, artist, DJ, wave lord, and architect of the Meaning Wave universe.
You all had a tremendous humor.
And he knew that nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success exploring your motivation, your dark, unconscious depths. That nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success. But there will be a certain point at which you will say, well, I've had enough of that. Do you see how, in a strange way, there's a certain sanity in that? When a person indulges in a certain kind of duplicity, of deception, there is something, you all laughed when I said that. There was something humorous about it. And this humor is a very funny thing. Basically, humor is an attitude of laughter about oneself. There is malicious humor, which is laughing at other people. But real deep humor is laughter at oneself. Now, why fundamentally do you laugh about yourself? What makes you laugh about yourself? Isn't it because you know that there is a big difference between what goes on the outside and what goes on the inside? That if I hint, you see, that your inside is the opposite of your outside, it makes people laugh. If I don't do it unkindly. If I get up in the attitude of a preacher and say, you're a bunch of miserable sinners and you ought to be different, nobody laughs. But if I say, well, after all, boys will be boys and girls will be girls, and we all know, then people laugh. Nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success exploring your motivation, your dark, unconscious depths. That nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success. But there will be a certain point at which you will say, well, I've had enough of that. Now, you see, what's happening when we do that? Now, I passed you around a lot of embroidery to look at before we started. And I'm perfectly sure that you got the point. That there's a big difference between the front and the back. In some forms of embroidery, the back is very different from the front because people take shortcuts. In the front, everything is orderly, and it is supposed to be kind of messy on the back side. See, which side will you wear? You've got to be sure you get the front in front, have the back in the back. The back has all the little tricks in it, all the shortcuts, all the lowdown that people don't acknowledge. And it's exactly the same with the way we live. You know, like sweeping the dust under the carpet in a hurry just before the guests come. I mean, we do ever so many things like that. And if you don't do it, if you don't think you do it, and you think, well, really, my embroidery is the same on both sides, see? Well, you're deceiving yourself. Because what you're doing is you're taking the shortcuts in another dimension, which you're keeping out of consciousness. Everybody takes the shortcuts. Everybody plays tricks. Everybody has in himself an element of duplicity, of deception. Because you see, from this point of view that I'm discussing, where the web is the trap, To be is to deceive. Nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success exploring your motivation, your dark, unconscious depths. That nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success, but there will be a certain point at which you will say, well, I've had enough of that. To be is to deceive. To be is to deceive.
Hi, it's David Hasselhoff, alias The Hoff. You're listening to Akira the Dawn. Stay tuned.
So, in the same way, we find that the watching self, or the observing self, behind all our thoughts and feelings, is itself a thought. That is to say, when the police enter a house in which there are thieves, the thieves go up from the ground floor to the first floor. When the police arrive on the first floor, the thieves have gone up to the second, and so to the third, and finally out to the roof. And so when the ego is about to be unmasked, it immediately identifies with the higher self. It goes up a level. Because the religious game is simply a refined and highbrow version of the ordinary game. How can I outwit me? How can I one-up me? So, if I find, for example, that in the quest for pleasure, the ordinary pleasures of the world, food, sex, power, food, sex, power, all this becomes a drag, and I think, no, it isn't there, so I go in for the arts, literature, poetry, music, and I absorb myself in those pleasures, food, sex, power, and I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures, food, sex, power, and I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, food, sex, power, literature, poetry, music, food, sex, power. And after a while, they aren't the answer. So I go to psychoanalysis. And then I found out that's not the answer. I go to religion. But I'm still seeking what I was seeking when I wanted candy bars. I want to get that goodie. Only I see now that, of course, it's not going to be a material goodie. All material goodies fall apart. But maybe there's a spiritual goodie that's not going to fall apart. But in that quest, the quest is not different from the quest for the candy bar. Same old story. Only you've refined the candy bar and made it abstract and holy and blessed and so on. So it is with the higher self. The higher self's your old ego. And you sure hope it is eternal. Food, sex, power, I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures. Food, sex, power, I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures. Food, sex, power, I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures. Food, sex, power.
So, what instead, therefore, if we see that you can't outwit yourself, you can't be unself-conscious on purpose, you can't be designedly spontaneous, and you cannot be genuinely loving by intending to love. By intending to love. Either you love someone or you don't. Either you love someone or you don't. If you pretend to love a person, you deceive them and build up reasons for resentment. You say, well, I ought to be honest. That's the beginning of it. Oh, so many lies you can't imagine. So many lies you can't imagine. Either you love someone or you don't. Either you love someone or you don't. Like when I hear a lot said about love, big love thing on. Everybody's got to love everybody. Everybody sings songs about love. Do you know what I do? I buy a gun and bar my door because I know there's a storm of hypocrisy brewing. I buy a gun and bar my door because I know there's a storm of hypocrisy brewing. Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, said, the highest virtue is not virtue, and therefore really is virtue. But inferior virtue cannot let go of being virtue, and therefore is not virtue. Translated in more of a periphrastic way, the highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue. Therefore really is virtue. The highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue. And therefore really is virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. That it's not virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. That it's not virtue. In other words, when you breathe, you don't congratulate yourself on being virtuous. But breathing is a great virtue. It's living. It's living. When you come out with beautiful eyes, blue or brown or green as the case may be, you don't congratulate yourself for having grown one of the most fabulous jewels on earth. So it's just eyes. And you don't account it a virtue. To see, to entertain the miracles of color and form. You say, oh, that's just But that's real virtue. Real virtue. Real virtue. Real virtue. The highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue, and therefore really is virtue. The highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue, and therefore really is virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. That it's not virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. That it's not virtue. Virtue in the sense, the old sense of the word, a strength, is when we talk about the healing virtue of a plant. That's real virtue. But the other virtues are stuck on. They're ersatz. They're imitation virtues. And they usually create trouble. Because more diabolical things are done in the name of righteousness. And be assured that everybody of whatever nationality or political frame of mind or religion always goes to war with a sense of complete rightness. The other side is the devil. Our opponents, whether in China or Russia or Vietnam, have the same feeling of righteousness about what they're doing as we have on our side. And the plague on both houses, because, as Confucius said, the goody-goodies are the thieves of virtue. Of virtue. The goody-goodies are the thieves of virtue. The goody-goodies are the thieves of virtue. The goody-goodies are the thieves of virtue. Which is the form of our own proverb. The road to hell is paved with good intention. Grace. Well, ask God, maybe he'll give it to you. And the theologian will tell you, yes, God gives his grace freely. He gives it to all because he loves all. It's here like the air. All you have to do is receive it. Or a more orthodox, a Catholic Christian would say, all you have to do is to be baptized, to take the holy sacrament of the altar, the bread and wine, the body and blood of Christ, and there is the grace right there. And it's given by these simple physical means so that it's very easily and readily available. Well, a lot of people got baptized. And it doesn't always take. People fall from grace. Why do they? You see, we're just talking about the same old problem. But we've put it a step up. But it's the same problem. How can I improve myself? Was the first problem. The second problem is, do you want grace? Do you want grace? Do you want grace? Do you want grace? How can I accept grace? They're both the same problem. Because you got to make a move, which will put yourself out of your own control into the control of a better. If you don't believe in the Christian kind of a God, you can believe in the Hindu kind of a God, who is your inner self. You see, you've got a lower self, which you can call your ego. That's that little scoundrelous fellow, always out for me. But behind the ego, there is the Atman, the inner self, the inward light, as Quakers would call it, the real self, the spirit, which is substantially identical with God. So you've got to meditate in such a way that you identify with your higher self. How do you do that? Well, you start by watching all your thoughts very carefully, watching your feelings, watching your emotions, so that you begin to build up a sense of separation between the watcher and what is watched. Do you want grace? Do you want grace? Do you want grace? Do you want grace? Carried away by your own stream of consciousness. You remain the witness, impassively, impartially, suspending judgment and watching it all go on. That seems to be something like progress. At least you're taking an objective view of what is going on. Of what is going on. You are beginning to be in a position to control it. But just wait a minute. Who is this self behind the self? The watching self. Can you watch that one? It's interesting if you do. Because you find out, of course, that this is just as the problem of grace is nothing more than a transposition of the first problem. How am I to be unselfish? By my own power. It becomes, how am I to get grace by my own power?
He's got clout.
the web of life. Let me try from the first to indicate the point that we're aiming at. The point is this, that human consciousness is at the same time as being a form of awareness and sensitivity and understanding, it's also a form of ignorance. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. And because of this, it leaves out things that are terribly important. It leaves out things that would, if we did know them, allay our anxieties and fears and horrors. And if we could extend our awareness, you see, to include those things that we leave out, we would have a deep interior peace. Because we would all know the one thing that you mustn't know. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more, according to the rules of our particular social game. The one thing you mustn't know, that's really not allowed, that is the lowdown on life. And the lowdown, on the one hand, means the real dirt on things. But the lowdown is also what is profound, what is mysterious, what is in the depths. And there's something left out. And our everyday consciousness screens this out in the same way that when you say you have weaving, you have, say, on this rug here in front of us, when the black finishes here, the black threads will go underneath and then appear again over here, then they'll go underneath the white and then they'll appear again over here, so that the back will be the obverse pattern of the front. Now, the world is like that. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. Our sense organs are selective. They pick out certain things. They're receptive. For example, we have a small band, what you might call a spectrum of light, of sound, of tactile sensation, and so on, to which the human organism is sensitive. But we know that outside that small band, there is a huge range of vibrations to which we have built instruments that are sensitive. Things like cosmic rays, ultraviolet rays, gamma rays, hard X-rays, and so on. They're all outside the band of our spectrum. And obviously, there are things that are outside the range of our instruments. We may build new instruments someday which will evoke, bring into our consciousness other orders of vibration altogether, but yet, as yet, we don't know about. So you could imagine, you see, the universe is a vast system of vibrations and has infinite possibilities. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have
I've gone for many a run and walk to Cynthia Allen Watts.
Revolutionary movements have to offer young people is a sense of romantic adventure.
I mean, if you're working at 7-Eleven in a dead-end job and you're offered an adventure, the chance to demonstrate dramatically for a messianic cause, especially if you're young, that's going to call to something deep inside you and excite you, because everyone needs a higher purpose, and that longing can be addressed by romantically inclined ideologues, but there are better ways of addressing that longing, I believe, and there's tremendous adventure in doing something like telling the truth. There's tremendous adventure in doing something like telling the truth. There's tremendous adventure in doing something like telling the truth. There's tremendous adventure in doing something like telling the truth. There's tremendous adventure in doing something like telling the truth. There's a tremendous adventure in that. It's a demanding ethical striving, and it's a form of responsibility to pay attention to what you say and to only say things that you believe to be true. And there's insane adventure in that, because you have no idea what's going to happen if you do that. You entice people into adopting ethical responsibility by pointing out to them in story and perhaps to the degree you're capable by example that there isn't anything more interesting or meaningful that they could possibly do. There's tremendous adventure in doing something like telling the truth. There's tremendous adventure in doing something like telling the truth. There's tremendous adventure in doing something like telling the truth. There's tremendous adventure in doing something like telling the truth. And I think that's part of the reason that my books and lectures have proved popular. I'm making a case for some things, I suppose, that you might regard as obvious, at least when viewed from a certain perspective. When I was talking to large live audiences, I noted that one topic in particular would bring the audience to a dead silent halt constantly, and that was when I made a rhetorical case for the relationship between responsibility and meaning. And you need a meaning in life. You need a purpose to sustain you through the catastrophe of life, through the suffering of life. You need a meaning. It's not optional. And the deeper the meaning, the better. And it's definitely the case that people find that meaning primarily in the adoption of responsibility. And that case isn't being made well in our culture, especially not to young people. There's a hunger, a mass hunger for that idea. It's better than happiness, that meaning. It's deeper than happiness. Happiness is fleeting. There's tremendous adventure in doing something like telling the truth. There's tremendous adventure in doing something like telling the truth. There's tremendous adventure in doing something like telling the truth. There's tremendous adventure in doing something like telling the truth. Of heavy responsibility, that's sustaining through good times and bad. It's always the case that the best story wins. One way of conceptualizing yourself is that you're one speck of dust among 7 billion. And when you conceptualize yourself that way, you might think, well, what difference does it make what I say or do? And that's actually quite convenient for you, because if it doesn't matter what you say or do, then you don't have any responsibility and you can do whatever you want. The price you pay for that is a bit of nihilism, but if you don't have to shoulder any responsibility, that's a small price to pay. The other way of looking at it, and this is actually the accurate way of looking at it, is that you're in a network. You're a node in a network. You can do a little bit of arithmetic very rapidly and just figure out how powerful you are. You know 1,000 people. You know 1,000 people. They know 1,000 people. They know 1,000 people. That means that you're one person away from 1,000,000 people and 2 persons away from 1,000,000,000 people. And you're the center of that network. And now the way networks work is that information propagates in a network manner. So don't underestimate the power of your speech. Don't underestimate the power of truth. There's nothing more powerful. Tell the truth. 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 Or at least don't lie. That's a start. Tell the truth. 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 Or at least don't lie. That's a start. Now, in order to speak what you might regard as the truth, you have to let go of the outcome. You have to think, I'm going to say what I think. Stupid as I am, biased as I am, ignorant as I am, I'm going to state what I think as clearly as I can, and I'm going to live with the consequences no matter what they are. Now, the reason you think that, that's an element of faith. The idea is that nothing brings a better world into being than the stated truth. Now, you might have to pay a price for that, but that's fine. You're going to pay a price for every bloody thing you do and everything you don't do. You don't get to choose to not pay a price. You get to choose which poison you're going to take. That's it. So if you're going to stand up for something, stand up for your truth. It'll shape you because people will respond and object and tell you why you're a fool and a biased moron, why you're ignorant. And then if you listen to them, you'll be just that much less like that the next time you say something. And if you do that for 5 years, you'll be so damn tough and articulate and able to communicate and withstand pressure that you won't even recognize yourself. And then you'll be a force to contend with. Tell the truth. 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 Or at least don't lie. That's a start. Tell the truth. 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 Or at least don't lie. That's a start. It's almost impossible to provide people with enough protection so that they feel safe to speak. Okay, so we'll address that directly. It is not safe to speak, and it never will be. The thing you got to keep in mind is that it's even less safe not to speak, right? It's a balance of risk. You want to pay the price for being who you are, for stating your mode of being in the world, or do you want to pay the price for being a bloody serf, a one that's enslaved him or herself? Well, that's a major price, man. That thing unfolds over decades, and you'll just be a miserable worm at the end of about 20 years of that. No self-respect, no power, no ability to voice your opinions, nothing left but resentment because everyone's against you. It's like, say what you think carefully. Pay attention to your words. Say what you think carefully. Pay attention to your words. It's a price you want to pay if you are willing to believe that truth is the cornerstone of society. In the most real sense. If you're willing to take that leap, then tell the truth and see what happens. Tell the truth. 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 Or at least don't lie. That's a start. Tell the truth. 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 Or at least don't lie. That's a start. Nothing better could possibly happen to you. There'll be ups and downs, and there'll be pushback, and there'll be controversy and all of that, but it doesn't matter. The truth is what redeems the world from hell. And that's the truth. And we saw plenty of hell over the last 100 years, you know, and we haven't learned a bloody thing from it. It's like, wake up. Wake up. Wake up. why would I put my job on the line to have an opinion? I know why. Because the ability to speak your truth is the bulwark against hell. And losing your job? That's nothing. That's nothing compared to where things can go when they go badly. For me, it was just preventative. It's like, this isn't going in a good direction. Well, should you take a risk? It's like, you don't have that choice. You're silent? That's a risk. Now, most people don't understand the risks of silence. I happen to understand the risks of silence because I've been studying them for 40 years. It's my language. I'll take responsibility for what I say. I am not saying your words. It's my language. I'll take responsibility for what I say. I am not saying your words. I know where corruption of speech leads. And I'm not going there. And you know, one of the things I tried to learn when I was taking apart what happened in Auschwitz and trying to put myself in the position of an Auschwitz camp guard, which, by the way, you can do if you use your imagination a bit. I wouldn't call it exactly the world's most pleasant meditative experience. You can conjure that part of yourself up if you want, and that'll teach you something about what you're like. People don't do it because it's too frightening. But I know perfectly well that I could do that sort of thing. And so once I learned that I could do that sort of thing, and maybe that I could even enjoy it, I thought, okay, fine, I get it. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to live so that if that opportunity was presented to me, I wouldn't take it. It's my language. I'll take responsibility for what I say. I am not saying your words. It's my language. I'll take responsibility for what I say. I am not saying your words. And I think that's the lesson that people need to learn from the 20th century. That's what human beings did, okay? Well, we're all human, okay? So how is it that we should live so that we don't do that again? Well, part of that is to try to say the truth. Part of that is to try to say the truth. Because the alternative is worse. And it is worse. It's my language. I'll take responsibility for what I say. I am not saying your words. It's my language. I'll take responsibility for what I say. I am not saying your words. know, I said what I had to say. I'm sure that I could have done it better, and many people have told me how I could have done it better, although it didn't mean they would actually do it. And you know, my job was at risk, serious risk, for about 2 months, and it destabilized my family. I've been very brave about this, so like, thumbs up to them, man. Here's the optimistic news. The university has left me alone completely. I shook hands with the dean 2 weeks ago. We're on friendly terms. They don't want this to go any farther than it has already. The students were tremendously welcoming when I came back to teach in January. I haven't had a single negative incident at the university, and I've received thousands of letters from people all over the world, all of which have been in support. I've received 2 negative letters. That's it. 2. People have an inchoate longing to have the sort of thing that we're talking about articulated, and so don't be thinking you're alone. It's just that people can't talk, they're afraid to talk, or they don't know what to say. And those are real problems. So if you're reasonably articulate, like, start talking, sharpen yourself up. I mean, the enemy is a cloud. They're a cloud of gnats. They're only courageous in groups. They're only courageous in mobs. If you stand your ground and don't apologize and articulate things properly, they'll disperse around you like they're not even there. Most of it's illusion. Most of it's illusion. Be afraid of the right thing, and the right thing you should be afraid of is not saying what you say, because that's the same as not being. And here you are suffering away. You might as well be at the same time. At least then there's something to you. I'm dead serious about this. It's like, sort yourself out.
Sort yourself out before you try to figure out the world, and that's the primary objective. Yep. That's your most important thing that you can do. Yep, sort yourself out.
Sort yourself out, and marshal your arguments and put yourself in order so that when someone pushes you a little farther than you should go, you can say no. You can say no. When someone pushes you a little farther than you should go, you can say no. You can say no. Here's some fundamental rules about the shadow that you might think about as you move forward through your life. So a lot of times you're going to have to negotiate on your own behalf. You should be able to stand up for yourself at least as well as you would stand up for someone that you care for. The problem with the idea of being nice to other people is that it doesn't take you into account. The fundamental rule is that you should certainly include yourself in the circle of people who deserve respect and care, and that means that you have to be willing to advocate for yourself. And if you're willing to advocate for yourself and you want to do it, you have to be able to say no. You have to, because otherwise you have to say yes, and then you can't negotiate. You can say no. You can say no. When someone pushes you a little farther than you should go, you can say no. You can say no. And in order to say no, You have to have armed yourself with strategies and plans that enable you to say no. You can't be dependent. You have to be willing to stand your ground. There's not much evidence that sorts of atrocities that characterized the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany were the result of a few extremely corrupt people at the top of the hierarchy forcing everyone into slavery and then making them do terrible things. I think that's a very weak explanation. And when you look at human capacity for destructiveness, if you don't regard yourself as one of the agents of that destructiveness, or at least one of the potential agents, then from the Union perspective at least, there's a high probability that you're part of the problem. You can say no. You can say no. When someone pushes you a little farther than you should go, you can say no. You can say no. If you familiarize yourself with the realm of human capability, and then you regard yourself as human, what that means is that you have to regard yourself as a creature that's capable of what human beings are capable of. And human beings are capable of a lot of things. And some of them are absolutely wonderful. I mean, there's nothing more remarkable than a human being on the planet. People can do amazing things, but the downside of that is that we can do absolutely horrible things. And it's not obvious that it's only the pathological people who do that. In fact, it's not reasonable to assume that. You can say no. You can say no. When someone pushes you a little farther than you should go, you can say no. You can say no. New Age thinkers tell you things like follow your bliss and you'll encounter utopia, but that isn't what the Jungians, especially Jung, said about his process of individuation at all. He said that if you follow what's meaningful and you do it honestly, it will take you somewhere you really do not want to go. And until you go there, you'll never be able to climb up higher on the other side.
How old was I when everything you understood started to come together? Akira.
I think that really started happening to me. It started probably happening to me when I was in my early 20s. I realized at about that age that almost everything I said was a falsehood of one form or another. I was using language instrumentally in order to win arguments or to attain dominance, indicate that I was intelligent, or to use it for victory, for narrow, local, personal victory. And I realized that when I was in my early 20s, and I started to, because a voice, in some sense, a voice started inside my head, which I now regard as something equivalent to the cricket in Pinocchio.
That gets you up, that makes you buck, that gets you up.
The voice
that gets you up, that makes you buck.
And continually informed me that the things I was saying weren't, in some fundamental sense, weren't true. And it was very disquieting because the voice that was commenting on what I was saying was making comments of that sort. I wouldn't call them disparaging. It was more just a matter-of-fact commentary. But I was saying it about 95% of what I was saying. And I thought, well, that's a strange conundrum, because now I don't know if I'm the voice that's criticizing what I'm saying or if I'm the thing that's saying what's being criticized. How do you figure that out? But I decided that I would take a chance and assume that the part that was suggesting that I wasn't saying things truthfully was accurate, and I started to practice only saying things that voice wouldn't object to.
The money gets you up. That makes you buck. The money gets you up. The money gets you up. That makes you buck. The money gets you up.
And I think that's also equivalent to some degree to trying to say only those things that make you strong instead of weak, or that do not fill you with a post-speech sense of shame and regret. So I'm going to tell you today about a way of looking at the world that I think is substantially different from the way that most people look at the world. The standard scientific view of the world, of course, is that it's made up of familiar objects, and that the world is, in essence, a material place. But there's some very potent limitations of that viewpoint, despite the fact that it's given us tremendous power. And the limitations are essentially as follows. The essential materialist view can't tell us anything about consciousness, which is probably the primary fact of experience. The essential materialist view can't tell us anything about consciousness, which is probably the primary fact of experience. Neuroscientists in recent years, mostly in the last decade, have been trying to crack the problem of consciousness, and they have absolutely made no progress. Not only do neuroscientists understand virtually nothing about consciousness, they can't even really figure out what its function is. They can't understand why our brains would go to so much effort to make us aware of things when it isn't clear at all that awareness is necessary for life, especially given that there are many life forms on the planet that don't seem to be aware at all. The essential materialist view can't tell us anything about consciousness, which is probably the primary fact of experience. The essential materialist view can't tell us anything about consciousness, which is probably the primary fact of experience. The standard materialist view is also insufficient in many other ways. It's insufficient philosophically, I think, as you probably all know, because a conception that portrays the world as made up of objects is in some really fundamental way dead. Right? It doesn't seem to have a place in it for human beings, or a place in it for meaning, or a mode whereby you might be able to conceptualize the real existence of something like an emotion, or a dream, or a motivation. All phenomena which are just as mysterious to neuroscientists and to scientists in general as consciousness. Now, the problem with this seems to be mostly experiential. If you have to ask people what they know more than anything else, they know, number one, that they're conscious. They know, number two, that their internal experiential life is composed of emotions and motivational states, which, although not rational in essential structure, are so real and relevant that virtually everything that people do is predicated on them. The essential materialist view can't tell us anything about consciousness, which is probably viewpoint, despite its ability to give us tremendous technological power, seems to eradicate from formal consideration many, many essential experiences that are vital to life, in fact, even perhaps primary. I'm going to suggest to you today that there's an alternative viewpoint, and I think also it's one that, although you may be hearing about it formally for the first time, is also something that you know unbelievably deeply.
Unbelievably deeply. Unbelievably deeply. Unbelievably deeply.
Thousands of years ago, Plato proposed that all knowledge was remembering. Of course, we don't believe that today because we believe we gather knowledge as a consequence of contact with the world. But you'll see today that the knowledge that I'm going to share with you will strike a deep chord of remembering, and it's because everything that you've done throughout your life is in one way or another predicated on what I'm going to tell you today. I'm going to demonstrate this in a peculiar way, I think, because I'm going to start by telling you a story. And the reason I'm going to do that is because models of the world that include phenomena like consciousness and emotions and motivations and actions and interaction are generally portrayed formally in stories and not in scientific theories. And it does turn out to be that stories themselves have an identifiable structure, even a grammar that makes them comprehensible. Furthermore, it turns out that even the simplest stories, especially if they're elegantly constructed, have an unbelievably profound underlying meaning. Underlying meaning. Unbelievably profound underlying meaning. And you can frequently see this most particularly in children's stories. Remember, I showed my son when he was 4 years old the Disney movie Pinocchio, which on the surface of it is a very strange tale, right? It's a wooden puppet who wants to become real, so he has to rescue his father from the belly of a whale.
Whale or no whale, I've got to find my father and rescue him. I've got to go to him, Jiminy. Goodbye.
Pinocchio is a deep, deep story.
Father, I'm gonna save you.
It has echoes that go back 3,000 or 4,000 years to the earliest stories that we know. And it's so rich with information that a child can watch it over and over and over and over. I think my son watched Pinocchio 30 times. Why? Well, it's either because a child can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality, or it's because there's something to those stories that's much more potent than we actually consciously understand. You'll find that in the top 10 highest grossing movies of all time are 4 Disney movies that are animated fairy tales, essentially retelling of mythological stories. They strike a deep chord. Why?
Why?
Underlying meaning. Underlying meaning. Unbelievably profound underlying meaning. Shakespeare was, of course, a great literary figure, said it perhaps better than anyone else has, which is not surprising because he said many things better than anyone else has. He said all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. And so following from that, you can imagine movie is about the props on the stage. The drama is about the manner in which people actually exist, the emotions that they feel, the motivational states they encounter, the problems they have to solve when they interact with each other. And the play's the thing from that particular perspective in which we can capture those aspects of our experience that are not only real, but essentially human. Essentially human. Underlying meaning. Underlying meaning. Unbelievably profound. Underlying meaning.
They have the exits and the entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts.
I'm going to tell you a little story to begin this off with. It's a kid's story written for children of about 4 years of age, but it's very, very elegant.
There's no such thing as a dragon. There's no such thing as a dragon. There's no such thing as a dragon. There's no such thing as a dragon.
Well, we all know that dragon is a fictitious creature. Reptilian, terrible, lives forever, breathes fire, hoards gold. Strange combination of attributes. Why would something terrible and ancient hold a treasure?
There's no such thing as a dragon. There's no such thing as a dragon. There's no such thing as a dragon. There's no such thing as a dragon.
Billy Bixby was rather surprised when he woke up one morning and found a dragon in his room. It was a small dragon about the size of a kitten. The dragon wagged its tail happily when Billy patted his head. It's interesting, you know, in Chinese mythology, dragon is a positive figure. In European mythology, the dragon is something to face in combat and destroy. Billy went downstairs to tell his mother. There's no such thing as a dragon, said Billy's mother. And she said it like she meant it.
There's no such thing as a dragon. There's no such thing as a dragon. There's no such thing as a dragon. There's no such thing as a
Remember once my daughter had a nightmare. She was about 4. This was at the time when she first started to notice graffiti and litter. Both graffiti and litter bothered her. She couldn't understand the motivations behind the graffiti artist, and she didn't like the fact that there was litter cluttering up the world's order. Children are really, really dependent on order, and the reason for that is that their realm of competence is rather restricted, so they don't like to see things messed up. She came into our bedroom one night and said, "Dad, I had a nightmare." Now, we all know, right? Nightmares aren't real, just like dragons. Dreams aren't real. Of course, which raises the question of why in the world you bother having them 6 or 7 hours a night every single day of your life. She said, "I dreamt that there was a clear flowing stream, but in the stream there was all sorts of garbage, and it scared me and bothered me so much I woke up." So I told her, "Look, close your eyes and imagine the stream. It's full of garbage. What should you do about it?" She said, I should take the garbage out of the stream. I said, all right, so picture the stream, picture yourself cleaning the garbage out of it. She calmed down and went back to sleep. Why? Well, because dreams concentrate on threat. We know that. They present threats to you, threats you haven't been able to deal with well. There's a part of your brain that tracks threats, and it's not all that smart in some ways. All it does is say, look, here's the problem. And it's waiting for the rest of your brain to conjure up some solution to that problem. And if it doesn't conjure up a solution, then it just presents the problem over and over and over and over and over. So people who have post-traumatic stress disorder, for example, who've been really upset by their contact with something unexpected, dream about the same tragedy forever until they solve it. And they solve it by facing it and living it over and over, voluntarily. There's no such thing as a dragon. Over and over, voluntarily. Why? There's no such thing as a dragon. Over and over, voluntarily. Why? There's no such thing as a dragon. Over and over, voluntarily. Why? There's no such thing as a dragon. Over and over, voluntarily. So you see, Billy, he's pretty much got it right off the bat, right? The dragon wagged its tail happily when Billy patted its head. Billy went downstairs to tell his mother. There's no such thing as a dragon, said Billy's mother, and she said it like she meant it. There's no such thing as a dragon, said Billy's mother, and she said it like she meant it. There's no such thing as a dragon. There's no such thing as a dragon. There's no such thing as a dragon.